Hello, this is Lawrence Romanowski from the Distinctive Collection in Calgary, Canada, and it's the middle of winter here, and hopefully this is the last big snowfall of the year, and then everybody can start thinking about buying some of our sports cars in our showroom right now. It's always exciting to do a video when you have a really fun, interesting car. I mean, they're all interesting cars, but I have a special fondness for Lotuses, and this is the highest spec, highest performance, fastest Lotus that of the last 10 years or so, at least on a track. So this is an Exige S 260. So going through the evolution of the Elise, or the Elise Exige, a family of cars, the Elise would have come out in 1996, and it would have been a brand new car for Lotus. Very significant car, bringing Lotus back to its roots, and of course the roots of Lotus are simple, lightweight cars that are very quick on a track, and they had a reputation for giant killers going way back to the 1950s when Colin Chapman came out with his Lotus 6s and Lotus 7s, and then which were road cars, and then road car based anyway, and then a whole line of extremely successful Grand Prix cars. Probably most famously with Jim Clark in the 60s, when that was one of the periods in F1 when one manufacturer just completely dominated, and if Jim's car didn't have a problem, he would be 2 laps ahead of everybody and just backing off at the end, similar to the runs of Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna for Honda, McLaren Honda, and Michael Schumacher lately with Ferrari. Anyway, so they would have gone back to their roots and come out with used some new technology, and that would have been I think the first instance of the bonded aluminum monocoque, which I don't think anybody had used before. The Lotus had always done lots of consulting work alongside their cars, and in fact made most of their money through the 80s and the 90s doing consulting projects. So they had a first-class engineering corps that had great ideas. So anyway, they put together this bonded aluminum chassis using some aircraft technology. It only weighs 150 pounds, and so the whole car came in at under 2,000 pounds. And before, Lotus had used a version of their own block. Well, it was their own block and their own head. It was a 2.2-liter engine. Started out with a 2-liter engine, then a 2.2-liter engine, then a 2.2 turbocharged engine. Like you can see, there's a Esprit in the background there, and then intercooled to 2.2-liter, all the way up to about 260 horsepower, and then it was had its origins back in the 60s, and they finally gave that up in around 2000 with their V8. But this engine is different. They wanted a lightweight, high-revving, powerful engine, and they went to Toyota for that. And this would have been the engine that would have been in the Celica GT-S, and that would have been in the late 90s. And that engine was a 1.8-liter, 195 horsepower engine, 190 horsepower engine, and it would have been competing with the Honda Integra Type R engine, which was also another 8,500 RPM, 1.8-liter, normally aspirated engine. They had special, to do that, to have an engine idle properly and to have an engine spin to 8,500 RPM, they used the variable valve timing. And Honda and Toyota came up with different versions of that. Toyota, I think they called VVTi, whatever that stands for. And then the Hondas was VTEC. So they took that engine, and it was 190 horsepower, and they would have added their own parts to it, intake, exhaust, etc., etc. But essentially, that's the engine in this car. And it didn't have a lot of torque. It's only torque is a function of the displacement of the engine. And at 1.8 liters, especially with a car that's almost 3,000 pounds, it wouldn't have had a lot of torque. But in a car that's 2,000 pounds or less than 2,000 pounds, then it had plenty. Okay, so then they would have come out with the Exige, which is basically an Elise with this hardtop. Now the first generation, it was a fixed hardtop, but this one you can actually take off and make it a Targa. You lose some of the effect of the big scoop there, sort of a ram air effect, and this goes to the intercooler in the back of the engine. So you lose that if you take the T-top off, but still, if it's only a marginal increase. So if you prefer to have a little bit more space and enjoy the sun, you can do that in this model. Okay, so then they would have come out with the Exige version, and then they would have come out with a supercharged version of the Exige, and that would have bumped the power a little bit up from 190 to 220. And then they would have come out with a couple different versions of this engine, and they came out with something called an S240 in 08, and that had 240 horsepower. And then in 09 they came out with this one, which is the 260, and it has 260 horsepower. And then for 2010 they discontinued the 260. So now you just get the 240. That leaves the Exige S 260 as being the one-year model and the most powerful model at 260 horsepower. So this then has to become the most collectible of the entire Exige S line. Lotus is now going in a different direction. They wound up, amazingly, when these magazines came out, I couldn't believe it, they wound up hiring a bunch of Ferrari guys, including the designer of the 458 and one of the senior marketing directors, and the company that owns Lotus hired them and gave them the brief to come up with 5 new models. And so they just showed those at the car show, completely different cars. But they're not like this anymore. The Lotuses they're going to be competing with Ferrari and Porsche and so on, and they're going to be heavier cars and 400 and 500 horsepower cars and hybrids, and they'll be $200,000 or more, or $250,000. So Lotus now is going in a completely different direction. This could stand then as, a very important car in the Lotus historical lineup, as being the last and the best and the fastest of the whole range of Elise and Exige cars. Okay, so what makes this Exige S 260 a little bit different and a little bit more expensive? Well, there's lots of carbon fiber on it. Chiefly, the Exige with the hard top adds a measure of structural rigidity to the car, and also the body design is a lot more aerodynamic. And so, with the addition of the this big carbon diffuser and the fairly prominent carbon rear wing and the whole carbon air intake, etc., etc. They've managed to get this body through the air a little bit cleaner and with more downforce. So most cars have lift at certain speeds, which is a detriment to the stability of the car. And some cars, they try to add ground effects and so on and achieve zero lift. And there's a very, very short list of cars that actually have downforce. Downforce would be, and the reason they don't is because the car going through the air and with the wing pushing it into the ground to give downforce increases the drag, which would be at odds with trying to make it go through the air and get the best fuel economy. So you'd only have a car with these big rear diffusers to create a low pressure area under the car, and even the exhaust coming through that to accelerate the air under the body. It's really clever stuff. It's all racing stuff. And the rear wing with a pretty high angle of attack. You'd only have that on a really, really focused driver's car where fuel economy isn't the priority. Of course, with a 2,000-pound car,
it gets excellent fuel economy. But I think this car has about 100 pounds of downforce at 160 kilometers an hour, and I think that's more than these Audis and the Ferrari and the Spyker, etc., etc. So, and it's a lighter car to start with. So the proportion of downforce to overall weight is pretty significant. So it's stable at high speeds.